Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session on 2 points of view at 2. I'm Rex Black, president of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and expert services for companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. Of course, for the last year, we've been doing all of that remotely, but we're still international in that we have clients around the world, even though none of us are going anywhere. I am speaking of people not going anywhere. I'm happy to introduce and welcome Jamie Mitchell to this presentation on test automation and metrics. We're going to talk about various kinds of metrics that have been suggested for automation. Jamie's got about 30 years of automation experience and struggled with the demand for metrics for management most of his career. And he says most of the metrics he's been forced to collect were, in his opinion, not only worthless, but also misleading and subject to manipulation by those who wanted to prove their point, no matter what that point was. There's actually a name for that effect. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please submit them throughout the presentation via your webinar interface, but please note that they are answered only at the end. So let's jump right into it here if I can get the screen to do what it's supposed to do. So there's the intro, which you just heard. So Jamie, over to you.
Well, thank you, Rex. I am a practitioner. I'm not nearly at the high executive level like you are, but I have been forced for the last 30 years to work with metrics, and I struggle to find any metrics other than are the defects that we threw out to production fewer than last time. That's the only one I've ever found that really works well. I started out with this quote, what gets measured gets managed, because I've been told that probably 50 times in my career. I did some research on it when you asked me to speak at this, and what I noticed was all kinds of people saying way back when in 1956 that this is ridiculous, that what gets measured gets managed, even when it's pointless to measure and manage it, and even if it harms the purpose of the organization to do so. I have a lot of reasons for this. Rex, do you have a stand on this this particular quote? Might be muted.
As usual, the COVID side effect, talking to yourself. Yeah, I mean, I think my observation of this is that, you know, it's more of what gets measured gets done, and then what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And then you have the complicating factor of what's variously called the Westinghouse effect that I alluded to earlier, which is people often will figure out a way to make the metrics say what quote unquote good looks like if they feel that there is something in it for them, even if they don't know there's something in it, or whether there's something in it for them. If they just are worried, I might get rewarded and or punished depending on what happens with this metric. So I better make this metric look the way that it is supposed to look. So I'm always very, very careful with that, though, you know, having to deal with management types and also being a believer that I want to have quantitative knowledge, I do tend to probably put more stock in metrics than you do, though I have a similar level of skepticism and I guess ire that I would direct against misuse of metrics or bad metrics. So that'd be my take on it.
Yeah, I can agree. When it comes to testing, I really don't have a problem with metrics. I've found that many of them are useful. In preparation for this, I watched your 2 points with Dawn, and I thought she said it really well. You said it really well. You know, that there's lots of ways to misuse, but that doesn't mean that they're useless. Could you hit the next slide, please?
Yep, there you are. Whoops, no, you were supposed to be. And then what did it do?
Didn't change.
There we go. Now it worked. Okay.
I created the Advanced Test Automation Engineer Syllabus for RBCS. I've taught it for a couple of different people, and these are the metrics that the Advanced Test Automation Engineer Syllabus says that we should be collecting. They say these are the important ones. And as I go through these, I find that I can game any one of them if I want. I want to tell a quick story. I did a consulting gig in New Jersey for 7 months, about, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and this organization had gotten permission. The test manager was an excellent manager, and he knew a lot about automation. And he set up a project. He brought in 3 very good automators, very good engineers, who are going to write the automation. And it was a complete failure because in order to get the money, he had to promise that within 1 year, he would have X number of automated scripts running. And this is an organization, a high profile organization that had no testing. All of their testing was done by the developers. After 6 months, they had a bunch of scripts, but they didn't test anything.
Yeah, I've seen that.
They were absolute garbage. I spent my first 2 days on site looking at this stuff, and I went to this manager and I said, "What the heck? This is not testing. This makes the screen flash and it makes it look pretty, and it probably looks really impressive to someone who doesn't know anything about testing, but it's not testing." And he says, "Well, we brought you in order to try to talk to the people, the developers, and to make the long story short, the developers didn't know how they tested. To the extent that they tested, what happened was their stuff was really brittle, and every time they made a change, it broke. And I would try to find out from them how to test it so we could automate it, and they didn't know. They
Of course, because they're developers.
So this is a case where the manager knew that he was tying his hands. He was so interested in getting the budget that he sold his soul, promising all of these tests that couldn't be done because they didn't have any testing to begin with. So the point of this story is about half of the places that I've gone to when I was a consultant working for someone else, about half the places didn't have any testing in place or didn't have sufficient testing in place, but they wanted automation. And so that's actually why 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I started my own company so I could say no. Okay. Now, that has nothing to do with metrics, but the fact is that even if you have good testing, a good tester, well, let me put it this way. I know you've read The Art of Software Testing. You've probably read it a number of times. Glenford Myers was a genius in 1979 when he wrote that. I think we've gotten to the point that testing is no longer an art. It's almost an engineering feat, but automation is an art. I woke up this morning, I had been dreaming. I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm not really good when I'm on presentations, and I've been rehearsing in my head and everything.
So far, so good, Jamie.
I woke up this morning and I realized that in my last hour or so of sleep, I had come up with 8 perfect scripts for a system that I tested 20 years ago. And I was thinking about this and I realized there is no such thing as a perfect script because automation tools, even now, I mean, I've been doing it 30 years, but even now, automation tools are stupid. I think you could say that your dumbest tester is still a quantum leap smarter than the best automation tool there is. So when you look at all of these different things, these estimates, the effort to build automated tests, the effort to analyze automated test incidents, the effort to maintain automated tests, the time to execute automated tests, that one I can figure out. But the rest of these things, when you're estimating effort, the best you can do is a WAG, just a wild ass guess, because you cannot tell for sure. No matter the tool that you're using, and I've used almost all of the commercial tools. Last couple of years, I've been using Selenium, or Selenium, as you had Jose say. And excellent tools that allow you to do all kinds of stuff, but you still have to deal by hand programming when the script doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or the system doesn't react when it's supposed to, or how it's supposed to. And so, a human tester can run a test, and on the next slide, I think we talk about EMTE, which I really hate.
I think it's the next one. Well, actually, it is the next one. Do you want to see that one?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay. Yeah, the benefits.
These are the measures that we had talked about at one time. If you go to the next slide, EMT is the estimated manual test effort. If an automated test would take 4 hours to run manually, then the EMT is 4 hours. And I've had an awful lot of managers say, well, what's the EMTE? What's the EMTE? And it drives me nuts, because all of these estimates that we're talking about are guesses. And every test is going to be different. So they say, we'll take the average, but there is no average, because it depends on whether the developers have done clever things with the application that the tool's not going to understand. It depends on whether your environment is stable or not. It depends on all of these different things. It depends on the developers not trying to hinder the automation, which probably isn't as much of a problem now as it used to be, but it used to be a huge problem. When I'm estimating these things, I can game them. I can say, well, if I want to get the money, if I want to get the job, if I want to get the gig, I'll say, well, we can do this in 3 hours, and we can do this in 4 hours, and we can do this. But it's a lie. It's all a guess, which will be thrown away the first time I run into a problem with the actual automation scripts. Now, ISTQB, in their automated test engineer, automation test engineer, whatever it is, they talk about building a test automation solution, which is a framework which is going to make it easier to handle all of these problems. And that's a great idea. There's no doubt about it. I call mine the framework. It's just a framework that's going to handle a bunch of stuff. But the problem is that test automation solution constantly needs to be updated and changed as the applications change. As you get a new version of something, the task is going to break, and trying to estimate how much all of this is going to take is just impossible. And so to wrap this up, the idea that I am giving metrics to management that say we're going to be at this place 3 months from now, and at this place 6 months from now, at best, I'm going to give them an estimate that is going to allow me to get the funding in the beginning. And 6 months from now, when I'm not on track, and they're going to want to know why, I'm going to have a whole list of excuses. I've got this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And I know that's exactly what's going to occur, because you start running these things. Like I said, your dumbest tester is smarter than your best automation. When a human tester sees something occur, they can make a choice right then. Maybe it fails because an extra dialog box came up and the tool doesn't know anything about it. And I can build code that says, okay, if an extra box comes up, handle it. But the problem is that my stuff gets so complex, because it's software, it also breaks. And now I have to go back and maintain it. I've got to, update it. I've got to make all the changes. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I believe that the only real metric that you can collect from automation is how many defects are we putting out into production? Because it should be less than when we weren't doing automation. We've had this discussion many times, Rex. What is a test? I've had people tell me that an automated test is 5 lines of code, and other people say, no, it's 5,500 lines of code. It's how granular are we going to be? Are we going to break up those manual test cases into multiple automated tests? How much extra stuff are we have to add in order to make it work? I can look at the number of false fails. Do I count it for one false fail that happens when the same thing occurs in 500 tests? Or again, to me, I get frustrated every time I talk about this. You can hear it in my voice. I'm frustrated now because I can't think of what management wants me to tell them other than to lie to them.
So I guess my thought on that would be, yes, if what they're looking for is to be lied to, for sure, you could do that. Though you could also do it in a way that's not. All right. Like, for example, the effort to build the automated tests and to analyze not just the automated incidents, but actually all of the costs associated with running the tests and the cost to maintain. Those are challenging to estimate, but you can measure them after the fact. You can also measure turnaround time. And I found those to be useful. The false negative counts, I definitely like to look at those because, if they got high false positive counts with your automation, then something screwy. Code coverage, I would agree, is pretty. I mean, if you're talking about unit tests, automated unit tests, code coverage is fine. But if you're talking about system level tests, then it's kind of like, well, what you're supposed to be focusing on is the functionality of the system at the system level, not, how much of the code you've run, right?
Oh, I absolutely agree. Let me clarify, because I guess I wasn't really clear. A lot of these metrics I do measure. For example, anytime a person's working on a script, that time goes into the test management tool, but it's not something I give management. It's something that I use myself. I want to know how much time was spent on this script for all of the times that we've had to change it, for all of the times we had false positives. That all goes into there, and I use those to manage the team.
Right. The difference between a tactical metric and a strategic metric is something that people don't always get. And so you get this problem where there is this tactical metric that's being used to manage the work that ends up bubbling up to senior management, and they glom onto it because that's what they've got. But it's like, yeah, but that's not what you were trying to accomplish, right? What are you trying to accomplish with the automation? That to me is a big problem with just metrics in general, is that this metric is just this free floating thing that is being measured and reported, and people are trying to make it do one thing or another. And it's like, well, yeah, but what are you exactly trying to accomplish, right? Tell me that, and then tell me how you're going to measure whether you're effectively and or efficiently accomplishing that thing. There's a strategic metric that's of value, right? But if it's just, I have this measurement and I have this idea of what good looks like, and so I'm going to try to make that happen. That definitely was where you get into trouble.
Yeah, that is the one. It's the strategic metrics that I hate, because I always feel like I'm lying, and I don't want to do that. I've had some real good successes at automation. 1996, I automated an application for the company that I was working for at the time before I became a consultant. I was using the first version, one of the first versions of Segway's QA Partner, and I was able to automate our application. It was a Windows application. I was able to automate it and then test it in 6 different languages, where our company, before I did that, our company, after we released in America, we sent it to Europe, and they spent 7 months translating it and doing all that stuff. And then they would release it in Europe. And because they didn't test it after they made changes, it would fail. I was able to automate it, test it in all the languages. We could release in Europe and America at the same time. And my company told me that we made somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million from doing that. Okay, from being early, and
that's a good
ROI.
ROI.
This is tremendous. This is what makes me really excited about automation. But if you had asked me to provide metrics before, to give estimates before, strategic estimates, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah, well, what I found with that, what is the benefit? What's the ROI? Right, getting to this slide here, is like I'm able to measure that. Well, usually it's based on, well, what is the organization trying to accomplish? If it's reduction in net testing effort, then I'll come up with the number. And then what typically happens is that I immediately get asked, is that good? Is that a good number? Is that a good number? Like one of my clients, I was like, okay, your return on investment is 107%. Basically, for every hour that you're spending on your automation, this is taking into account the time to develop, time to execute, time to maintain, the whole thing. That's saving you net about an hour and whatever 7% is, 5 minutes, hour and 5 minutes of manual testing effort. And they're like, well, is that good? And I said, look, this is really simple. If your ROI on automation is greater than 0, then that's good. And if it's less than 0, then you have a problem, but you're in good company, because there are plenty of organizations out there that have an ROI that's less than 0. They just don't know it. So in your case, you're positive, and that's good, So you have to sort of resist this, oh, the ROI should be this, or another one of my pet peeves is the percentage of tests automated should be this. The worst of that being the percentage of tests automated should be 100%. Right? It's like, so now you're saying that any test which cannot be automated is not worth running, because that's ultimately what that means, right? If you're saying we have to achieve 100% test automation, all that's saying is, as soon as the engineers figure out I'm just not going to be able to automate this test, or it's going to be too much of a pain in the ass, they just drop it. And it's like, oh, yay, look at that. Our denominator got smaller and our percentage went up. That's a win. Right. Yeah. Well, it looks like we do have some questions coming in. So let me go ahead and just pop the advertisement up here while we do it. So it's an interesting one from Sean. So Sean says, can you talk more about why you think the only metric that matters is the number of defects discovered in production being less than before? And he asks, how do you measure this? Is it based on releases, or is it time-based?
I think it's both. I think a lot of people look at 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days after release to find out how many defects. There's
DDE, basically, right?
Yeah, the DDE or DRE, I guess I've heard it both ways. Defect removal efficiency. I want us to be better than before. I'll tell you the truth. This is what I would tell my clients once I started my own company. The reason to automate is not to find more defects. The reason to automate is to allow your manual testers to find more defects. Mm-hmm. To take all of the drudgery and the crap that they have to do and offload it to the automation so that they can do the really good defect finding that they're capable of. Right. I'm a huge believer in manual testers. Automation is simply a way to make them more effective.
So the DDE you're measuring here is not the DDE of the automation, which of course is going to be pretty low, because the automation the automation shouldn't find many, because it's regression testing, right? If you're finding a lot of regression defects, you got some significant design issues with your application, right? So right. So you're basically you're going to say the automation helps the testers be more effective bug finders, because they're able to spend their time looking at things more productive than regression testing.
That's my belief that that's where automation fits in.
Yeah. As far as the release-based versus time-based, I think you kind of answered that question. Time-based is the easiest one to do. I've had some clients try to do it that's release-based, and you can, depending on how your releases work. But unless you have a really well-organized release management process, what I've found is that determining which specific release a specific defect leaked out in is not something most organizations are going to be able to figure out.
So in other words, maybe it's been in there for a couple of releases and it was just found.
Yeah, and then so
Yeah,
you're
that
not
makes
gonna,
sense.
yeah, and then the more frequently you release, the bigger the problem there, right? Or if you have, like one of my clients, so you have this concept of major releases, minor releases, and patches, and the amount of testing is varies from one to the other, and they were like, yeah, we're going to figure out what our DDE is per release. I'm like, I don't think you are, actually. I think you can try that, but I think what you're going to find is that it's just going to be way too difficult to figure out how to properly account for the defects. But to me, that doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as you got a reliable DDE, you know, sure, it's going to vary from one release to the next to some extent, but probably not enough that it matters. You're not, change your behaviors based on that.
Well, the important thing is, year after year, it should be going down. We should be getting better
All right. Yeah. DDE
if we're
goes
doing
up
a
and
good job.
production defects go down. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a question here from Bill. Bill asks, any comments on the CodeMRI product from Silver Thread? Which, Bill, I'm going to trust that this is not your employer, though you'd be pretty bold if it is, because who knows what we're going to say. Product from Silver Thread that, among other metrics, claims to generate some ROI value. Some Harvard Business School people helped design it. Well, it must be great then, because, it's crimson. You have any experience with that?
I don't.
I don't either. I've never had any of my clients mention it.
I kind of have a problem with ROI ever since I attended Star Canada, and Dorothy Graham gave a pitch on ROI, and I think she kind of hit it out of the ballpark. What I talk about is value. Do we add value or not? Her explanation, if I remember correctly, was that the bean counters and the people in management look at cash when they talk about return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's no cash coming back from the automation. You're not, it's not an ATM that ka-chings a couple of bucks out at you every time you run it. We can get value. I look at that value of those manual testers getting more time to do what they need to do. So I haven't tried that particular tool. Sorry.
I haven't either. Okay, I think we got time for another question here. Bring us to the bottom of the hour. It's from James. Good turnout from our friends here in San Antonio. Has the evolution of software development from waterfall to agile and now the continuous integration, continuous deployment changed how you do test automation? So that's a good one for you, Jamie.
Absolutely. In my mind, and again, I'm pretty well set in my ways in this. The automation, I think, should be done off of the Agile team. It should be done by a test team, automation team, building tests that are referenced to them by the testers on the Agile team. I've never figured out how a tester on an Agile team would have time to do automation. But yeah, it makes it more important, I think, to have a good test automation solution, or what a task, the way that ISTQB talks about, something where I've got all kinds of different parts to the framework which do a lot of the helper functions in the automation. And then I run the scripts by calling those functions, kind of like building the automation like a Tinker Toy or a Lego,
Yeah.
Where you take the script and the script is just calling out to the task, which is going to do the actual work, the error handling, the synchronization, all the rest of the stuff. I do find that task is more important in Agile rather than in Waterfall because of the time constraints that we have. Trying to get those scripts running so they can immediately be used in the next sprint.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a comment from Bill here on our recent comment there about the Silver Thread. He says, not my employer, but I'd like to evaluate it before we consider using it or similar products to help our manual testers. Well, I would say, Bill, extreme skepticism should always be brought to bear on any tool vendor.
Please.
You know, at the quantity of bovine excrement that can be encountered in the process of talking to various kinds of tool vendors about their tools and what their tools will do. I don't know, Jamie. I mean, it's, you know, my experience is it's, you know, not even measurable in metric tons. You have to have a larger scale than that.
My rule of thumb is it's a lie until I prove that it's not.
Yeah. And not even necessarily a lie. It might just be one of these. We had this one situation where this worked out really well, and now we're going to promote that as typical, right? But you know what is the typical situation? You know, and plus, who cares what the typical situation is like? What happens with us? So I have a comment from Jason here. Oh, you want to comment on that?
I was just going to say that's why I talk about automation as an art. Because every environment is different. Every application you're going to automate is different. Every set of developers who are sending you sludge are going to be different. And no tool is going to work by itself. At least I haven't found one yet. Nope. So you bring in a tool, but then you need to customize everything in order to get something of value that can be used release after release. Yep. That's my experience.
Yep. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of wind it down. We got a last comment from Jason here. ROI is extremely difficult to determine in development and test. 20 years, and I won't call out your employer, Jason, but 20 years at a large organization that people would know if I mentioned it has taught me that. So yeah, that's yeah. ROI is tricky. So. Well, Jamie, appreciate you staying a little long on this, and looks like most of our audience was happy to spend a couple more minutes with us too. So glad they were able to stick around. Any last points you want to make? Parting shots?
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for doing it.
It's one of those things that I'm getting to the point where I'm just the old man telling you to get off my lawn, you know, telling the kids to get off my lawn. And so I no longer know whether I'm just being a curmudgeon or whether 30 years has made me a cynic. But either one, I appreciate the chance to spout off.
Well, if you're standing on your lawn with an M1 carbine, then you're not just being a curmudgeon, you're being Clint Eastwood, because there's a famous scene in what was that, Gran Torino, where he's out on his people drive the car onto his lawn, and he comes out with his M1 carbine from Korea and says, "Get the hell off my lawn." So as soon as you're standing on your lawn with an M1 carbine, you know you've graduated into that particular class. So great.
It seems to me too often, and this is my last point, too often the consulting companies come in and they're willing to sell you any dream that you want to have, just like a drug pusher. But the fact is that most of the time when they come in, they're lying too. And you can make automation work. But if I had to look at how many automation projects actually add value, I would have to guess that even now in 2021, it's less than 50%.
I'm pretty sure that's a fair bet. I mean, to me, you how many clients can point to, how many of my clients can point to an automation effort where it is substantially the same as what they initiated 5 years in the past, and they're satisfied with the value that they're getting out of it and haven't had to make major changes. Very, very unusual, right? So yeah, I mean, the
horror stories are a lot more voluminous than the success stories.
Yeah, and if you were getting positive ROI out of something, you wouldn't need to throw it overboard in 5 years or less. So pretty safe bet that, a lot of people are not. So. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Jamie. I want to point out that the consulting companies that come in to lie to you, I'm going to let that pass without comment, other than to say, not us, please. So, RBCS, we won't lie to you. We will, if your automation sucks, we will tell you, honestly. We will. we will give you metrics that make you know your true situation, even if it makes you kind of sad, because rather be honest than I don't
Well,
know, a
I've been
billionaire.
working with you since about the year 2002, and that's what I've always found for RBCS. It's why I've hung around so long.
Well, thank you for that. That's why we're a small boutique consultancy as opposed to an enormous one. uh, so on that cynical note, I will grab my M1 carbine and say, get the hell out of my webinar, and wind this all down. And I hope everybody, including you, Jamie, enjoyed this free webinar from RBCS. We do these as a service to the software testing community, because at RBCS, we are a not just for profit company. If you enjoy our free webinars and feel that they demonstrate solid insights into the kinds of testing challenges you face, please make RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. And we're happy to provide a quote for any such help you might need. Contact us at info@rbcs-us.com. And if we can't help you, we'll tell you that. We won't tell you we can't help you and then not help you. We will tell you honestly whether we can help you. So again, Jamie, all those of you who attended, thank you, and see you next time.
See you next time.